welcome back to part 3 of talking about our story.
Mhm.
My name is Aaron. This is my better half, Patience. And today we will be talking about some of the most recent developments in our marriage that kind of better contextualize why the
Mm.
earlier parts of our relationship were what they were.
Yeah.
And this is the part where we dive into fear
Mhm.
and the role that fear played in myself as the husband, uh, creating an environment that was almost like a pressure cooker
Mhm.
for our relationship, as
Mhm.
well as the things that I learned from like a year of therapy and a lot of reading that ended up creating space
Mm.
for us to come out of that
Yeah.
by God's grace. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Fear, in and of itself, is a survival mechanism,
Mhm.
right? It's something that is designed to protect oneself rather than designed to actually foster and
Mhm.
create safety.
Yeah.
David Hawkins, who we'll talk a lot more about in this episode, actually describes fear as like uh, an old programming
Mhm.
that is no longer needed and is a distortion of reality.
Mm.
And so in my life, just based on my upbringing and things that happened going all the way back, I ended up I ended up developing this fear
Mhm.
of abandonment, fear of not being loved, fear of
Mhm.
not being accepted.
Yeah.
And so then I meet someone as amazing as Patience, and I knew that I wanted to be with her.
Mhm.
And yet I also had those fears.
Right.
So every time Patience would do something, right, it would play into these fears.
Mhm.
Every time she wouldn't do something, it would play into these fears.
Yeah.
So we talk a little bit about the donut story in the last episode,
Yeah.
uh, or I guess
Maybe the first
it was the
episode.
first episode, yeah.
Yeah.
So with the donut situation, that was playing into this fear of not being loved, not being
Mhm.
seen,
Yeah.
fear of being not actually cared for.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it hurt more than
Mm.
it would have hurt otherwise. And also ended up creating this sort of weird scenario where, again, like the most important thing in my life was I
Keeping your
needed
word.
someone to keep
Yeah.
their word with
Mhm.
me so that I could feel like I could rely on them and I could feel safe.
Yeah.
But then I had like this metric of what made safe for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if people do exactly as they say they're going to do every single time, then I can be safe.
Mm. Yeah.
What ended up happening with a lot of work that we'll talk about in this episode, the practical steps that I took to get past this, we just removed that little middle step of I need X in order to be safe, and
Mhm.
instead just went to I'm safe,
Mm.
which fostered a relationship, which then allowed for both of us to kind of grow past this.
We talked about this in recent episodes, I think, where in our conflict, a lot of the time you were a pursuer and I was a distancer. And for me, I just wanted to withdraw from conflict and stonewall and just not be present, deal with it later, or not at all, really. But I know that with you, I think in our conflicts a lot of the times you if the conflict wasn't solved then and there, or if I left to take some time away to process my feelings, I think you were afraid that I wouldn't come back, or that I didn't love you, or that I didn't want to solve this with you. Is that
Mhm.
right?
That's 1,000% accurate.
Yeah. And I think that just I can't say the word exasperate.
Exacerbated, yeah.
um, it just made the problem worse.
Mm,
Because your need to solve the problem then and there, and that fear made me want to run away more and or placate you and
mhm,
like just give you the right answer so that you would get off my back. I would ask you the right questions, or I would say the right things
mm,
like, "Hey, I'm sorry that this happened. I'm sorry XYZ." And like I really can't remember specifics, but I know that I would say the right things, but they didn't solve the problem because I wasn't authentic about it and I was just saying it to say it to get you off my back.
Yeah, because I was on your back.
Yeah.
And so that's huge because like we would do all of the things that the therapist told us to do, but
Mhm.
because I didn't feel like they were genuine, it
Mhm.
didn't solve the problem. And because I had this fear, I needed it to be solved right then and there in order for me to feel safe.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this also kind of ties into the need to control the outcome,
Mm.
which was a big issue that I had.
Yeah.
Now, I had enough awareness early on in my relationship that this fear existed
Mhm.
and this tendency to be controlling existed.
Yeah.
So when we were dating, we
Mhm.
had a conversation about that at camp. That was one of the earliest conversations we had. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I think you had warned me in advance that like you have the power to be manipulative and controlling, and not that you ever wanted to be or that you were trying to be, but you knew how.
Hmm.
And I think you had warned me about that. And for me, I was like, yeah, it's probably fine. Like I didn't think anything of it. And then, obviously that led to a lot of situations like our fast engagement and
Mm.
stuff like that.
Yeah, where I was basically pressuring you to make a move and to do what I wanted you to do
Mm.
because I didn't feel safe if it didn't go according to my plan.
Dang.
And we talked about this in the earlier episodes
Mhm.
of like, while we were, I worked so hard to come up with a decision to date you. So come hell or high water, you're going to date me.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, the engagement needs to like, we need to get engaged quickly because
Yeah.
that's the right thing to do. It's like, well, if
Mhm.
I think that, then that's the right thing.
Mhm.
But if it doesn't go according to that, who knows what could happen? And it
Right.
goes back to this fear, this little child
Yeah.
in an adult's body. I don't know what
Mhm.
you would call like a young 20 something, it's like a young adult, right? This child in a young adult's body
Mm,
acting out of fear, trying to control everything in his life
mhm,
so that it went according to plan.
mhm.
Because if it didn't, I was unsafe,
Yeah.
right? Like it literally triggered like a
Mhm.
safety thing for me.
Wow. Dang. Didn't this come into play with your friendship that broke
Yes,
off?
that's huge. So, and this is actually the first step that I had in discovering this problem. So,
Mm,
I had, and I'd mentioned this in a previous episode, I had a friendship, like my closest friendship that I had. We were friends for over a decade at this
mhm,
point, and we had a falling out. And I had no idea why. Again, this is fear was very subtle
mhm.
in our relationship.
Yeah.
It wasn't overt.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
wasn't like I was just this nervous wreck all the
Mhm.
time.
Which is why it's so hard to pinpoint and see the effects of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had fears.
Mhm.
I knew that I could be controlling and
Mhm.
manipulative
Yeah.
and I knew that I didn't want to be, but I
Mhm.
didn't put all the pieces together as to why I was afraid. I didn't put the pieces together as to how the fear and the controlling tendencies
Mhm.
were actually one and the same. The controlling tendencies was a
Dang.
manifestation of the fear. It was
Yeah.
this need for things to, it's an egocentric thing for
Mhm.
things to go according to how I want them
Yeah.
to be because I was afraid of it not being how I wanted it to be.
Mhm.
And so that ended up manifesting in a lot of my relationships, namely, obviously, our relationship, but also a relationship with this friend of mine.
Mhm.
And what ended up happening is it was a very unhealthy dynamic. We ended up parting ways and it
Yeah.
crushed me.
I remember being really confused as to like what happened. But then this goes back to what
Yeah,
you were
because
learning.
we didn't have the emotional maturity. I didn't have the emotional maturity to understand
Mhm.
what I was doing wrong in that relationship. So
Right.
what ended up happening is this friend of mine, I was so afraid of abandonment
Mhm.
that I gripped so tightly to him that
Mhm.
I choked him out.
Mm.
And I almost saw him as part of me. That if he left me,
Yeah.
it said something about my identity.
Dang.
All of this being lies from the enemy.
Right. Yeah.
But I believed them. It was like a core piece of who I was.
Mhm.
And so all of this came as a result of therapy, by the
Yes.
way. When it happened, I was like, bro, this sucks. And then like as a few months passed, I was like, okay, like I need to go to therapy to figure out what's going on and like learned all of this stuff about myself, which also helped our relationship because I was seeing it show up
Yeah.
in our relationship as well, which
Mhm.
is also, as you mentioned in the previous episode, the thing that inspired you to go to therapy
Mhm.
and to find your own issues
Mhm.
and then work through those. So it was like both of us were going through
Yeah.
this self-development journey, and we'll talk a lot about this in the season of like how each of us working on our own
Mm.
stuff made a huge difference. So
Yes.
um anyway, in this relationship, I was holding on to him so tightly. So like if he, literally I would control so many elements of his life. So
Mhm.
he ended up going to a college
Mhm.
that was different than the college I went to.
Mm.
but I was like, crap, he's going to be away from me.
Dang.
So I like almost gaslit him and guilt tripped him into choosing to go to that college. And I was like, well, you should go to the college that I'm going to.
Mm.
Not because it was a better college for what he felt called to do in his life, but simply because I was there.
Yeah.
And I would like try to find every way to like get him to go there, right?
Mm.
But it wasn't what the Lord called him to do. And it was just so much of me trying to control elements of his life, that it ended up creating this unhealthy dynamic. Like I tried to control, the partner that he ended up marrying, right? This amazing young woman, but it's like it wasn't what I thought he needed to do. It wasn't my plan. Tried to control like who he built relationships with. Tried to control how he thought, literally his hobbies and his interests. And because I saw him as an extension of me, because I was afraid of letting go. I was afraid of him being his own individual, because if he's his own individual, then he has the free will to walk away, which means I could be alone. And I was so freaking terrified of being left alone. And so I ended up squeezing him so tightly that like he had to leave for his own health and safety. And it was this gut-wrenching, very humbling realization that I came to. And by the way, the Lord has since healed that relationship and allowed us to kind of come back to a healthier place, thank God.
It's just crazy how much fear controls things. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, you don't have to let fear control things, but if you're not aware of it, fear will dictate so much of your actions and your thoughts and
Yeah.
your feelings.
Yep.
And yeah.
And so in our relationship, like I wanted you to be a certain way. Like I had a fear of not being able to marry my perfect wife, my ideal wife that I had.
Yeah.
I had a fear of life not going according to my plan, of not being fully loved and accepted by someone that I thought was who I wanted to marry. And so I was holding on to this image of my ideal wife, which did not then allow me to fully receive and accept you for who you were,
Yeah.
and to open up my hands.
Yeah. There's this, I've heard it said before, I don't know who says it, but if you're holding on to something, your hands aren't open to receive.
Mm.
So you're just holding on to something. And if you're holding on to something bad, that sucks,
Yeah.
like you're stuck with it.
It's like barbed wire,
Yeah.
and you're bleeding,
Yeah.
right? But you're so afraid to let go and accept what is there, like what God has for you, because to let go means that there's a moment there where there's like a question mark of like, what if?
Yeah.
And that's a really uncomfortable place to sit. One that I didn't have the emotional strength at the time, the maturity to realize. Like I wasn't comfortable sitting in the question mark. And this showed up everywhere in my life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started going to therapy, which was at this point 2 years ago, something like that. Yeah, 2 years ago, that I started going to therapy and kind of realized all of this. I also started reading some books about fear, which is actually very interesting. So we'll go ahead and talk about that now. And this will make a really good transition into like, okay, what is fear? Where does it come from? How does it connect with all other things like love, right? As well as what the Lord says about it. And finally, practically, how do you actually let go of fear? How do you let go of those things that you're holding on so tightly to? Because I didn't know that for the longest time. It seemed all like abstract. How do you let go of that so that you can actually move on? So let's go ahead and talk about that now. So there's this book called Power versus Force. And if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's a super awesome book. Check it out. Power versus Force is written by David Hawkins. David Hawkins is a scientist, and he kind of talks about like vibrations and frequencies and things like that, which I kind of like pushed off as being like this really dumb thing. I thought it was just like a bunch of new age spirituality and was against Christianity and all that stuff. But ended up like it's just it's literally science. Like it's scientifically backed. I didn't realize that. But he lays out kind of a map of the levels of consciousness. And it goes kind of calibrates on like a log. I'm not going to try to go into the calibration scale here, but from 0 to 1000, and anything below level 200 in terms of like the level of consciousness, like how you operate emotion, that's related to force. And then everything that's above 200 is associated with power. And the difference between power versus force is key. Most of our society, most of mankind operates on a basis of force. Force tries to accomplish with great effort
Mm.
and fails
Mm.
that which power can achieve with no effort.
Yeah.
Force is movement, trying to make things happen. Power just simply does,
Yeah.
right? Force is like power sits still and things move around it.
Mm.
Force tries to make things move.
Yeah.
Power is focused on others. Force is focused on self.
Mm.
Power gives life, gives energy. Force drains energy.
Yeah.
It is destructive to human life.
Yeah.
Again, most human beings operate in a basis of force.
Mm.
So there's a whole scale for it, and you guys can look this up. If you're watching the YouTube video, I'll literally put a map of the map of consciousness here now, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. But force is, or fear is actually a thing of force,
Mm.
which means that it drains life.
Yeah.
It is controlling. It is
Mm.
focused on the ego.
Yeah.
It kills, right? Fear is a tricky little thing because it is a survival based paradigm
Right.
rather than a paradigm for thriving
Yeah.
and flourishing.
Mm.
But it requires letting go.
Mm.
And the only reason you stay in something of force, like a thought process or just a way of being associated with force or a level of consciousness, as David Hawkins would put it, is because you're holding on
Mm.
to something,
Yeah.
or you're holding on to a belief,
Yeah.
or more specifically, you're holding on to a lie that the enemy has whispered to you that you've accepted.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes so scary to let go of those beliefs because like you feel like it's your identity, and changing that is scary.
Yeah. And even that idea of scary,
Yeah.
it's fear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, if we think according to ways of force, we then try to solve our problems
Mm.
with force,
Mm.
right? And so someone can move up and down this scale, but I'm talking about like how they chronically live. Now, for me, I was chronically living in fear.
Mm.
So, what ends up happening at this point is now I'm trying to control all the outcomes in my life and make sure everything goes according to my vision for what I want it to be because I'm so afraid of letting go.
Mm.
Because if I let go, what if I'm abandoned?
Yeah.
What if what if no one loves me?
Mm.
And so there's a few things that I did to be able to move out of that spot.
Mm.
The first is just being aware.
Mm.
And that's what
Yeah.
therapy helped
It's
with.
huge. Yeah.
Is to find the root.
Mm.
What am I afraid of? And why am I so afraid?
Mm.
Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Like, what created this in my life?
Mm.
And for me, it was I needed to forgive, right? People that hurt me
Mm.
in my childhood,
Mm.
and that's hard. That's honestly still a process I'm walking through.
Yeah.
But each day that I make the choice to forgive them, it's a choice to let go.
Mm.
And it's like I'm letting go of barbed wire,
Yeah.
right? So like, it's not like I'm letting go of something good.
Yeah.
I'm letting go of something that makes me feel protected,
Mm.
but doesn't actually foster
It
safety,
actually hurts you.
right? And again, it's a lie of the enemy. It's meant to keep me down,
Mm.
to steal my life, to kill me, to destroy.
Mm.
It comes down to forgiveness, and that's a very hard thing, and something I'm still actively, like, I have to redo it over and over again.
Yeah.
And as I do that, I notice that I'm then just more free to love, right? And life flows through me.
I have this thought. I've never thought of this before, but like when you're letting go of things that don't serve you, you also have your hand open to receive, and it allows for more connection and intimacy. So like if I have my hand closed, I can't hold your hand, you
Mm.
know? I can't, obviously the people who are just listening to this can't see what I'm doing. But but like if I open my hand, then I can actually grab your hand and be close to you. So
Yeah.
like that's such a simple example of like if I just want to be more connected with you and want to be more intimate with you, just opening it up, letting go of the things that are not serving me, and then opening up my hand to hold you and to
Yeah.
receive you.
Yeah.
But that's just going back to
Well,
that.
the thing is, in our marriage, again, like the problems were made out to be bigger because I had all these hypersensitivities,
Mm.
aka everything was feeding back into fear.
Mm.
And so like things bothered me more than it should have.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to truly see you for who you were. I
Mm.
wasn't able to truly connect with you. There was no vulnerability. And this showed up in a lot of ways, and we don't need to go into the specifics of all the ways that it showed up, but we were even just talking about this yesterday
Mm.
of like the most vulnerable moments in our marriage. I didn't want to be there. I didn't feel safe being with
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And sure, part of that was from you, right?
Absolutely,
It
yeah.
was a two-way street.
Mhm.
But I think a big piece of it was I'm holding on so tight and I'm trying to protect myself,
Yeah.
right? I have the
Mhm.
guard up.
Mhm.
And so then I'm not actually able to like let that down and actually see you for who you were.
Yeah.
We talked about in previous episodes of, uh, if someone tried to ask me like anything good about my wife, I would just sit there and be like, shoot, I can't think of
Mhm.
anything, right? Where that's coming from was a place of like, I was so scared to truly see you for who you were because all I knew is that you weren't the person that
Mhm.
I thought I would get,
Yeah.
right? You didn't match my expectations of who I was going to get,
Yeah.
right? But then once I dropped that, which we'll talk about here in just a minute on like practically how I dropped that. Once I dropped that and let go of that, now, dude, someone asked me for a list of all the things I love about my wife. I could go on for days. And so, like you were just talking about earlier, it's like you're at the donut shop.
I was working at my little donut job that I have, and like just out of nowhere, I just felt so much love towards you. And like that didn't used to be a thing. Like,
Hmm.
and today, like I just wanted to go home and hug you, and I think I was really just missing you. So, but I felt so much love towards you. And I think in the past, like with all of my immaturities and your immaturities colliding together, I didn't feel that before.
Yeah, and honestly, same, right? Because like now when I look at you, it's just overflowing, bubbling love,
Yeah.
and like we can work through our issues because like we have the common ground of we love each other. But that wasn't there,
Yeah.
right? Because I was
Mhm.
holding on so tightly to the little things that I thought protected me, but then I wasn't open to actually feel safe.
Mhm.
And Jesus even talks about this in Luke 12. When I was back in college, I did like a just a meditative study on Luke 12, and it's a very impactful chapter if you haven't read it. And the whole concept behind that chapter is that the key to being free from anxiety
Mhm.
is go
Mhm.
letting go of the need to control. Maybe it's letting go of possessions,
Mhm.
letting go of what you think life needs to be,
Mhm.
trying to get everything your way, letting go of everything you're holding on to, material or just beliefs and ideas. And he says, do not be afraid, little flock, for the Father takes pleasure in giving you his kingdom. He says, seek first the kingdom of God, and all of these things that you need and more will be added to you.
Mhm.
Slightly paraphrasing there, so don't quote me on that. But it's just powerful, powerful words coming from Jesus about this very concept thousands of years ago.
Mhm.
And David Hawkins then adds on to this in his books Power versus Force, as well as his book Letting Go.
Mhm.
And he goes through a very specific exercise that kind of allows you to get
Mhm.
free from that. So I'll share that exercise here. So the first step is to identify that, okay, I'm feeling fear in this moment, and
Mhm.
there's a key to it. And you had brought this up in a previous episode, and I just honestly thought that this was freaking brilliant. You said, don't identify
Mhm.
with the emotion,
Yeah.
but simply recognize that it's there.
Yeah. Rather than saying, I am afraid, or I am sad, or I am mad, saying, I feel afraid, or I am feeling sad. You don't have to give it um like a rating. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to say this is a bad emotion or this is a good emotion. And I realize also that like if you're identifying it and you're thinking it's a negative thing, that's going to bring in shame. And that's just going to make things worse. You're going to spiral downwards. So identifying the emotion, recognizing that you're feeling it, but not giving it weight, just seeing it. That's it. There's no good or bad to it.
Yeah. And so then, like, when we can operate from this place of, okay, I am feeling fear
Mhm.
about XYZ,
Mhm.
right? The next step of that is not assigning a label of it being a bad thing. So
Mhm.
literally just yesterday morning something happened that caused me to feel a lot of fear,
Yeah.
right? And I went in this fight or flight mode, right? And in that moment then I was like, well, shoot, I thought I was past this. I thought I no longer struggled with fear.
Mhm.
And then I started feeling shame over feeling fear. And it creates this downward spiral,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because shame is a lower level thing than fear.
Yeah.
So it just keeps going down and down and down.
Yeah.
It's self destructive.
Mhm.
And so to not label it, like you said,
Mhm.
as being a negative thing
Yeah.
is huge.
Mhm.
Now we can look at the fear as it comes,
Mhm.
not letting the fear be who we are, and not trying to suppress it,
Mhm. Yeah.
but simply sitting with it. And another thing that often happens is it can be uncomfortable
Yeah.
to sit with these emotions, especially if you're not like acquainted with them,
Mm.
right? And they can be like unwanted strangers. And a therapist that I had many years back put it like this: of seeing a stranger walking down the sidewalk, right? Your feeling is walking down the sidewalk with you.
Mhm.
You don't need to fully engage with it and overanalyze that, person,
Mhm.
right? You also don't need to punch the person in the face and
Yeah.
push them aside,
Yeah.
right? But simply all you do, and you don't just ignore the stranger, like shove past them,
Yeah.
right? You're just acknowledging the stranger,
Yeah.
saying
Do the
hi.
little head nod,
Yeah, it's a
and
little
then
head
you keep
nod. Yeah,
walking.
exactly, right? So you're acknowledging the feeling as it's
Mhm.
coming. It's not something that you have to play with and let that plane land, but you're also not trying to shove it aside, which then creates fear.
Mhm.
Now that feeling is just going to get bottled up.
Yeah.
You're suppressing it, you're repressing it, which only means that it's going to pop up again later
Yeah.
somehow, right? Or it's
Yeah.
going to poison all of your actions, which is what it did with me.
Mm.
It wouldn't pop up. Like I didn't have like an anger issue or like a yelling issue,
Yeah.
but it would poison actions that I would take because those actions were coming from a place of fear,
Mhm.
because I just would be pushing my fear down. Another thing I ended up doing was I would then I would actually express my fear in a way of like I had so much going on that little things turned into big things,
Mm.
and I needed to get all this little energy inside of me out.
Interesting.
So when the little things would happen,
Mhm.
I would they would be big things, and I would need to sit down and have a really long conversation about it. And I would just need to
Mhm.
talk about the whole thing and like get it out. And all that did was just put all the weight on you.
Yeah.
Right? It created so much pressure in this relationship. Again, the relationship became like a pressure cooker.
Mhm.
Why? Because I didn't feel comfortable just sitting with a feeling on my own.
Yeah.
And not that you can't talk about these things with your partner,
Yeah.
but it's one thing to identify the emotion and let it be there,
Mhm.
right? And to sit with it on your own, or maybe even voice to your spouse, "Hey, my spouse, I'm feeling fear
Right.
right now.
Mhm.
I just want to sit with it for a moment."
Mhm.
Or maybe it's like, "Hey, can I like, just kind of talk through a couple of these things with you?" But it's a very light thing, but you're doing it as a curious, compassionate observer of the feeling
Mhm.
rather than being one with the feeling,
Yeah.
and or trying to push the feeling away, or by taking it and then dumping it on someone else, which is something that I would do a lot of times.
Uh-huh.
And so again, small things will become big things, and I'm trying to take all this like energy that I have and get it out somehow,
Mhm.
right?
Which
Which
turned into like hour-long conversations about very minor things.
100%,
Yeah.
right? And those minor things struck chords because again, it's hitting on fears.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing as well. It's just like letting the energy sit,
Mm.
right? Notice where it is in the body.
Yeah.
So it can sometimes show up in like tensed up shoulders, or
Mhm.
like tightness in the chest, or
Mhm.
like for me it was like headaches and like
Really
feelings in my neck,
interesting. For me,
right?
it's like a stomach drop. Like my stomach is
That's
just
big.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then just sitting with it. So being with it.
Mhm.
So literally going into the presence of the fear. So practically what this looks like is identify the fear, notice it,
Yeah.
acknowledge it,
Mhm.
and then be with it.
Yeah.
Not be one with it, but sit there with it. And then relax. Don't try to not be afraid, right? Because all you're doing then is you're bottling it down,
Yeah.
right? Be okay with letting that energy sit there. Think
Mhm.
of it like a wave and let it pass through. And it passing through might take 5 minutes, it
Mhm.
might take 15 minutes, it might take a few days.
Mhm.
For me, it's something that sometimes can take a few days,
Yeah.
right? The thing that bothered me a ton yesterday,
Mhm.
it didn't take me probably 24 hours for that feeling to pass through my body,
Mhm.
right? For the cortisol to get
Yeah.
out, right? And I'm sitting with it. And it's like, I feel fear, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's no judgment
Mhm.
on it. It's I feel fear, and that's okay. And I
Mhm.
notice it, and I sit with it, and I intentionally relax my body.
Yeah.
Everything that's tight, I just relax with it, and I sit with it,
Mhm.
and I just notice it. Curious, compassionate observer, and there's no judgment,
Yeah.
right?
Well, then what's next?
So then at that point, we want to make sure that we're not engaging with the thoughts. It's just with the feelings. So
Mm.
drop the story.
Mhm.
Oftentimes we tell ourselves the story. The story is the what ifs, right? Uh, Let go of that,
Mhm.
right? We don't need to control the outcome here.
Yeah.
God is in control.
Mhm.
If we believe that God is good and he's in control, then we can rest in that and take safety in that. And so Christ is actually called the Pantocrator in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. They're the icon of Christ, which if you're watching the video, I'll put that icon here. is called the Pantocrator, which means ruler of all, which means that God, Jesus Christ, is sovereign. Everything is in control. Nothing happens outside of his will, and his will is good. He says, what good father, if his son asks him for a piece of bread, will give him a stone or a snake? No, good father. How much more will your perfect father, who loves you more than you can comprehend, give you what you need? Right? And so we can rest in that. We might even pray. This is something I do, is the Jesus prayer, which is an ancient Christian prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that word mercy doesn't mean in a punitive sense of like pardon. It's like healing oil, healing ointment. That's the actual Greek word used there for mercy. So it's God, have mercy on me, sinner. And it's just recognizing my need for him and resting in that. It's like, God, I surrender this to you. I know you're in control.
It's like refreshing.
It is. And it's not easy. And the fear for me doesn't usually go away immediately, right? And that's okay because I can sit with it. But I'm going to drop the story and all the things I'm afraid of happening. I can drop that. Now, it might be hard for me sometimes. It's hard to drop the story. So here's a very practical thing that one of my mentors taught me to kind of let go of the situation thing that I'm afraid of. So everything that happens in life doesn't have inherent meaning of it being a good or bad thing in and of itself. It doesn't have an emotional charge unless we assign the emotional charge to it. So let's take this, for example. I'm afraid of being alone, right? Well, I can tell you what, there are some people out there that really want to be alone, right? So the idea of being alone isn't inherently a bad thing. I'm only assigning that meaning to it.
Absolutely.
Right? We can go as far as like an aggressive dog. So I had a dog attack many years ago, and it created this like fear thing, right? It was a traumatic moment, had to go to therapy for it. It was a whole thing. And in that, I became afraid of aggressive dogs, right? I see aggressive dogs as a bad thing if the dog is aggressive. But I can tell you what, if someone's looking for a guard dog,
you're like, that's good.
Right? Or like a dog fighter, as horrible and vile as that is, like they see that as a good thing. So we assign the meaning to the thing, but the situation itself has no inherent energy to it or charge to it. So what we can do is we can balance our perspective on the situation itself that we're afraid of by looking at all of the benefits of the thing we're afraid of, right? And it kind of neutralizes the emotional charge a little bit. So let's take, for example, I am afraid of my spouse not being XYZ, not being who I want her to be, right? Then what I can do is I can literally write down 25 benefits of if my spouse is not XYZ, right? And what that does, and it's hard at first, right? Because the first thing's like, I can't think of a single benefit. You sit there with it 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes if you need to. This is an exercise that usually takes like an hour, right? Or a few hours. There's like more steps to it, but we don't need to go into like full in depth. But that's like the big piece of it is like, what are the benefits? And what we're doing is we're just balancing the scales a little bit, right? You can also go into like, okay, what was like the main moment of charge? Like what were all the benefits of that thing? But that gets a little deeper. But what it did for me was it allowed me in one sitting to really let go of the story. Right? Another element of this as well is that fear is darkness. Fear is like a shadow. It doesn't actually exist. It's a very limited perspective. The lower you are on these levels of consciousness, the more limited your perspective is. And as you go up, your actual perspective expands. And so fear is you're not afraid of the thing. You're afraid of what happens outside of the thing. Right? Which is really just a sign of a limited perspective because we're small. We don't see the whole picture. God writes the whole story and the whole picture, right? So think of it like a long film strip, right? We see one frame. And that one frame is all that we see. And what we're afraid of is what happens next that we don't see. God wrote the story. God's looking at the whole film and he says it's good. So we can rest in that. But this is just a sign of like, God is great and he knows what is going to happen. And he says that it is good. All things work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That's what Romans 8:28 says. So we can rest in that fact. And that's how we get rid of a shadow.
Yeah.
Is you shine a light on it.
Yeah.
And you just look at it and you're like, oh, well, I guess that's not that bad.
Yeah. Because there's nothing there.
Because there's nothing there.
If you take away the narrative, take away the thing that's creating the shadow,
Yeah.
you know? And who is the light? It's God.
It's Christ.
Yeah.
That's huge. You're like spot on that. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the light that shines in darkness. And so when we rely on his truths, and it might even help, so this helps me sometimes. I'll literally look in the mirror and it's like, I am safe. I am okay. Right? Things will turn out fine. And I used to be like a big basher of affirmations and stuff, but like small little baby steps for me, like that really does actually help, right? To simply speak God's truth over my own life gives me some space to breathe, and it shines truth, a light that drowns out the lies of the enemy. And they're lies, right? The things that I'm afraid of, they don't exist, right? They only exist because I create them. And by me resisting the fear ends up becoming true. What you resist persists.
What you run from means it's chasing you.
It's chasing you.
Yeah.
And yet in our marriage, I was afraid of you not being who I wanted you to be, which only made you not who I wanted you to be.
Yeah. I mean, I was just I felt that fear and I became more insecure and more anxious and less loving, you know? So because I felt that fear, I was less able to feel comfortable in who I actually was. Yeah.
And then once I let go of that, then that freed you up to actually be the beautiful person that you are.
Knowing that you were going to accept me and love me as who I was.
Exactly. And then the very thing that I was afraid of only existed when I was afraid of it. And then once I let go of the fear, it actually ended up turning out better than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy how that works, that this protection narrative that we put up is old programming. Right? That distorts reality for what it is. And when we let go of that, we put the guard down, we actually create safety. We actually create trust. I was afraid of not being able to trust you, and I couldn't trust you. But then when I dropped that, it created so many opportunities where I could see it's like, oh man, I can trust my wife.
Yeah.
Right?
Have you ever seen like that meme where there's like two dogs and they're on two sides of a fence and they're barking at each other?
Yes.
And like they're barking at each other and they're like being really aggressive, and then the fence moves and they see each other and they're like, hey. You know? And then they put the fence back and they're like, rawr.
Yep.
I feel like that's what fear is. It's like you're putting up a wall, and because there's a wall there, you're not connecting. You're not actually speaking to each other. You're not actually communicating through anything. And when you take that wall down, you can actually be like, oh, this is who you are, and I love you, you know? Yeah.
Huge. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll definitely put the
We should put
there.
the whole clip in there, yeah.
So yeah, all of this really boils down to sitting with that wave of energy in your body, acknowledging it for being there with no judgment, no suppression, no unloading it.
No narrative.
No narrative, just sitting with it. And if you struggle with it, that's okay. We're just looking for 1% better.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it's too much to try to drop the narrative. It's okay. Right? If you don't try anything, just sit with it. And it might be uncomfortable. Sit with it. And if you can only sit with it for 5 seconds, that's huge progress.
Do 10 seconds the next day.
Then do 10 seconds the next day. And all you're looking for is 1% better.
Yeah.
And it will take a while. That's okay. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to respond to force with force. We want to respond to force with surrender and acceptance and willingness. Being willing to sit there. That is courage. Courage is the foundation of all of this, right? To sit there, face our fears, acknowledge it, not label it or judge it, but just let it be there. And when we do that, and when we let go of the narrative, when we let go of trying to fix it, this isn't about solving. This isn't about strategy. This is about healing. This is about letting go. This is about surrender. When we do that, the fear ends up dissolving in its own time. And we don't need to judge it for the amount of time it takes. It usually takes me a while. It's not a very quick thing, right? But the more practice I've gotten on this, over year and a half, 2 years at this point, the practice I've gotten on this, now the fears don't usually come up as often. And when they do, like sometimes I'm tempted to go back into that place of shaming myself for it, but then
Yeah.
I sit with that and I just notice it and I just let it be.
Mhm.
And maybe I need to like take that sheet of paper and I write out all the
Mhm.
benefits of it,
Balance the scales.
right? Maybe I need to shine a light on it. I look at the worst case scenario and I say, okay, like, is the worst case scenario here really that bad? Or how would I handle it, right? I can sit there and I can do these things,
Mhm.
right? And all of these different practical steps ultimately helped me reach a place where the fear no longer grips me.
Mhm.
And all it is just old programming passing through whenever it comes back up.
Mhm.
And that created this very safety
Mhm.
that I was trying to create.
Yeah.
But now it's just
Yeah.
here.
And with that, safety allows for more vulnerability, more intimacy, more connection. And our marriage has gotten infinitely better.
Yeah.
Just in the past year, feeling that criticalness and that fear or that control that you were kind of exercising in our marriage, having that dissipate and allowing us to have a more safe and connected marriage has just been wonderful. It's been a breath of fresh air. So
Glory to God. And
Mhm.
I've seen you be more free to just blossom
Yeah.
and be who you really are, be
Yes,
who God made you to
definitely
be.
more freeing with less of your fear.
Yeah. It's no longer a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
We're just taking it day by day and we're having fun.
Yeah.
By the grace of God and the things that He's done and being able to trust in His sovereignty, as well as just a few practical tips in the mix, every day we
1% better.
1% better.
Yeah.
And that grip that fear used to have over me has less and less of a grip over me.
Mhm.
And as such, less and less of a grip over our household.
Yeah.
That's all we got. So thank you again for listening to another episode. In the next few episodes, we'll be diving into some specifics of our relationship, different things that we've noticed, different things that we've done, and how we've grown. The different things that we've practiced. There's quite a lot, so there's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of episodes on this.
We got some episodes on focusing on our own self development, and then also identifying the lies of the enemy
Yeah.
and shame and
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah, and so like for me, like the big thing was like fear. Like I struggled with
Mhm.
fear so much. And
Mhm. For me, it's shame,
yeah.
which is a little bit different. It is a little bit different.
Yeah,
So,
and so like
yeah.
we'll talk about that. We'll talk about all of these different things in our later episodes, but that is it for the Our Story three-part series here. That's quite a long time, but
Yeah.
we started going through the beginning of our
Mhm.
relationship, then going through a big chunk of our marriage when
Mhm.
things are really difficult, and then finishing off on like, you know, how we really created that freedom in that space for us
Yeah.
to blossom and flourish and go forward. So for you, go forth in peace. We love you, and we're praying that your marriage is impacted even a tiny, tiny bit from any of the things that we discuss here. If you're following us on YouTube or Spotify, any of those things, please click that follow or subscribe button so that you can stay tuned for the next episodes that come out every Tuesday. Chat soon. Bye.